Welcome, John Kempf. It is a pleasure to have you join us at our soil. This is a
Oh,
conference that was, something I came up with, something I dreamed about, and it's something I always imagined you being part of because my understanding, my education has been predicated on your work, has been carried through by the work that you've done. So thank you,
oh,
John,
well,
so much for being here.
thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for picking up the baton and running with it. It takes all of us to contribute our part, and I admire the work that you're doing and continue to do. So thank you. Thank you for the accolades and thanks for all you're doing. It takes all of us to contribute.
I would love to talk about the current state of regenerative ag because many people are just hearing about this. Many people have been hearing about it for years, but there is still a confusion about what it actually is definition wise, what the limits and parameters. Is it just a new form of organic? How is this different? How is this and also where are we and where are we headed?
Matt, I could give you a neat, concise, soundbite type of answer, but I don't want to give you that type of answer right now. I want to talk about what we should be thinking about. There is this verse in scripture, and you'll have to forgive me because I read scripture in German and then I attempt to translate it sometimes. But um, there is that we should be renewed through the renewing of our mind. And when you actually go into the original Hebrew and you look at this verse, the proper translation is not through the renewing of our mind, but through the renewing of our heart. And regenerative agriculture at its most fundamental level is a, a need to regenerate stewardship and what it means to interact with God's creation. Like we recognize, many of us, the majority of farmers, at least here in North America, come from a Christian background. They profess to be Christians. They profess, we profess that we need to be good stewards of his creation. And on the other hand, we have adopted this model of agriculture that has been the mainstream contemporary agriculture for the last 80 or 90 years that is the antithesis of this stewardship ethos. We have adopted a model of agriculture that is destructive, that degrades soil health, that degrades human health, that degrades livestock health, and it has negative impacts. It is not an example of good stewardship. Now, we could make the argument that much of this has been done unwittingly or perhaps even unwillingly to some degree, that farmers got led down this pathway by policy and by government, et cetera. But that just means we're not taking personal responsibility and we're refusing agency. We're saying that I am not responsible. This is someone else's fault. But ultimately, each one of us is responsible for being good stewards. And so I think I've thought a lot about why is it that we profess to be Christians, and yet we have a model of agriculture that is obviously not a reflection of good stewardship when we have dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico and polluted groundwater supplies and on the list goes. And I think it comes down to three fundamental misunderstandings of scripture, a combination of three issues. And I'd love to talk about this in depth, but that's a conversation for the moment. I'll give you a recap right now. The first belief is the belief that the earth is cursed. The second is the belief that we are to dominate and to subjugate. And the third is the belief that it's all eventually going to burn up anyway. And I believe that each of those three foundational beliefs is incorrect. And that, my perspective, my opinion, is not just because I want it to be so, but because I have done thorough research into the original Hebrew and understanding what was originally intended to be communicated. And first of all, if anyone believes that the earth is still cursed, they should read Genesis 8, I think 21. After Noah emerged from the ark, he said, I will never again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. So it's true that the earth, from this perspective, the earth is in a fallen state, but it is different. Being in a fallen state is different from being cursed. Second, the idea that we are to dominate in Genesis, where we're described as being to have dominion over, that word dominion meant something very different 400, 500 years ago from what it means today. And the original Hebrew really means to steward and to minister to. It's a completely different perspective. And third, the idea that it's all going to burn up eventually anyway. Like, we have so many scriptures and so many evidence. First of all, nowhere in scripture does it say that the earth is going to burn up. It says the elements will melt with heat, but it does not say that the earth will burn. It does say that the earth is groaning in its fallen state, and it is waiting for its redemption. Now, how can you redeem a planet by burning it? It doesn't compute. But anyway, I get too wrapped up in. But the point foundationally is that we need, in order to have a regenerative agriculture, we need to renew our hearts and renew our minds and re-engage with a deep stewardship model of what it means to be good stewards of God's creation. That is the fundamental. And then that renewing of hearts and minds needs to express itself in our actions, the actions that we take. Are we regenerating degraded soils and degraded landscapes through our management decisions? The only difference between a farm that is regenerating versus a farm that is degrading is the management decisions of the caretaker. That's the fundamental deciding factor between the two. And will those management decisions be perfect? No, they will not always be perfect because we're human, but they need to progress in a certain direction. And so that's perhaps not the answer you were looking for, but that's the deep philosophical answer of what does it mean to be regenerative, to behave in a regenerative way? This is the foundational underpinning. We can talk about regenerative practices all day long, but without this fundamental reorientation, the rest of it is just a cerebral exercise that might gain us some momentum, but there really needs to be a heart change from the beginning. So then, continuing with the idea of a cerebral exercise, how should we think about regeneration? Not just feel about it from a philosophical and a heart perspective, but how do we think about it? How I think about regeneration is that regeneration is fundamentally about regenerating relationships between plants and soil microbes, between livestock and the landscape, between ourselves and the landscape and ecosystems, and between human organizations, between farmers who grow food and the people who buy that food, and the people who are supplying inputs to the farmer. Like, all of those relationships I shouldn't say all of them, but many of those relationships have degraded to be selfish, where one party wins at the expense of the other, to be self-serving. And the only way to have a truly regenerated and regenerative relationship or of agriculture for the long term is where farmers have collaborative and synergistic relationships where they are supplying food to people and they are also being nourished in turn, monetarily and economically and otherwise. So regenerative agriculture, if regenerative agriculture is only defined as regenerating soil health by doing 6 principles of soil health, we have really missed the fundamentals of what regeneration should be about.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. So for many people, it's that perspective that allows us to grow, to adapt these practices because with organic it was like, oh no, we got rid of the sprays and then the soils got terrible. You know what I mean? They
Yep.
didn't do the next step. They just thought removing something was
Right.
equivalent to adding. But the perspective of growth allows us to always to question, always to seek a higher solution to a problem. And it leaves us it protects us from hubris in a special way.
You mentioned a great point there at the beginning, Matt. The absence of toxicity does not mean the presence of quality. I think this is a piece that, like, the original founders and pioneers of the organic agriculture movement recognized this. Like, it was written into the organic regulations that there needed to be constant improvement of soil health and constant improvement of soil organic matter. But because it wasn't easy to, like, that, all of that has, for whatever reason, many good reasons, I'm sure, all of that has been left by the wayside, and it's become exclusively defining organics as the absence of a certain category of toxins. And Yet what we desperately need as an entire civilization is we need food that has is so nutritious that it has, I don't even like the term anymore of medicinal value, but because food should have nutritious value that supersedes medicine. I mean, the two should not be conflated with each other. Many people have very negative associations with medicine, justifiably, but we need food that is so nutritious that it regenerates our health. And think about what this world could be like if today we think that in order to be healthy, we need to be on a diet. How did that come about? How is it that the words food allergy, like that is a compound word that we accept as being normal?
Mm.
Why would we be allergic to food? And why, in order to be healthy, do we need to go on a diet? Those are all reflections of how corrupted our food system has become. And this is partially a reflection of food processing, but it is also a reflection of the degradation of the quality of the food that we are growing. Some time ago, a couple of years ago, I forget the exact timeline, but I had a podcast interview with Dan Aberhart, an individual who I have tremendous respect and appreciation for. I was doing agronomy work and working with a lot of broadacre crops up in Canada. And actually, maybe I was on his podcast. It doesn't matter. But we were talking about the need to grow high quality food and for them to produce, in their context, to produce high quality wheat. And Dan's response was, well, yeah, we pride ourselves in growing high quality wheat here in this region. And my question was, how do you know? And they didn't know because the way wheat quality has been defined has been as a protein percentage. But the reality is we don't even measure protein in the lab. The only thing we're measuring is nitrogen and multiplying that mathematically to derive a protein number, and we presume that that represents quality. When we know for certain that that does not correspond to baking quality, and it also for certain does not correspond to nutritional value and the ability to enhance our own immune system. Anyway, I'm getting into too many details, but that's just one example. We have lost sight completely of what it means to produce nutritious food that can nourish us and that can stimulate our immune system so that we are resistant to diseases and insects equally. Yeah, so so that we are resistant to disease and we're resistant to degenerative illnesses. Never mind the insects part. Yeah,
An added benefit.
yeah. By the way, did you know that if you have high enough levels of what is it? I think vitamin B1 or B2, I forget which one, that you will not get mosquito bites and you will not have the same degree of insect susceptibility. Like there is such a thing as resistance and susceptibility for humans.
I definitely live that. My wife gets eaten every single time we go outside. I never get eaten, so that's probably what it is.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's a known contributing factor. Yeah.
What other success stories of transitioning do you have?
Oh my, Matt, where to begin? Well, based on what my monologue at the beginning of this conversation, transition can mean so many things.
Hmm.
Transition of our hearts and minds, transition in the field. There is incredible momentum happening in the countryside. There are a lot of farmers and people who are interested in transitioning. But you know what is interesting is, um, and I'm painting with a very broad brushstroke here. There are certainly many individuals for which this isn't true. But my perception is that the majority of transition that is happening, of people who are becoming open to a different approach, is not a result or not a reflection of a desire to do something better for, it's not a desire, not initially, it's not out of a desire for better stewardship. Initially, in many cases, it is a result of economic duress. We know that farms are in a very difficult financial position. It was very difficult in 23. It was difficult again in 24. It looks like it could conceivably be even more difficult in 25. And it is an unfortunate reflection of human nature that we are averse to change. And we generally become open to change when our back is against the wall. And that is unfortunate because, and that's true not just of us of individuals, but also at a societal level. When we look at the way weather patterns are changing, weather patterns are degrading, severe weather events are becoming severe weather events are becoming more intense and more frequent. And the data clearly shows this and clearly supports this, and many people experience this and live this in their own little part of the world as well. Like, we know how to stabilize climate. The work of Walter Yeni and Alpha Low, there are many people who've clearly communicated and described the various mechanisms by which we can stabilize the small water cycle and stabilize climate to a degree. And we can disagree about the sources all day long, about the drivers. It's whether it's solar particle flux or carbon dioxide or water vapor in the atmosphere or bare ground, whatever it is. The solution for all of them is that the one thing we all agree on is the solutions. But you know what we are failing to implement is the solutions. And you know what we will probably continue to fail collectively? We will not have the political will. We don't seem to have the political will to implement those larger scale, regional scale solutions that require us to work collectively until our back is against the figurative wall.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that extends outside of what people would consider regenerative ag into the areas that the USDA manages as ag, but people don't realize, like forestry.
Yeah,
I mean,
forest,
our
BLM, absolutely.
that's fascinating. The perspective of regenerative ag, the stance it takes with nature needs to be applied everywhere. Because I mean, with the way we manage horses, the way we manage water and watersheds, all of it.
One of the foundational paradigm differences between regenerative ag and environmentalism is environmentalism historically has held that the best way to regenerate landscapes is to remove people from the landscape. Whereas the ethos, I think a more Christian ethos and the ethos that I align with from a regenerative agriculture perspective actually says that, or believes that humans are a hyper keystone species, that we have the ability to intentionally, consciously regulate the presence of keystone species, and that as a result, the fastest way to regenerate ecosystems is to have caring, loving stewardship by human hearts and hands. The fastest way to regenerate is to have more people on the landscape, not less.
And in the past 20 years, I mean, I was a touring musician 20 years ago, and seeing how so much of America is emptied out. There is just not enough hands, not enough people working the land, not enough people on the land caring
You know
for
why
it.
that is? You know why that is? It's because we don't pay them. The fundamental piece that needs to be regenerated is regenerating the capacity for stewardship. You could say the capacity for stewardship means opening hearts and minds, but really, regenerating the capacity for stewardship means that we need more people on the land and the landscape, and we need to pay them well. So because we have had these very selfish, extractive relationships from the people who are buying food and from the people who are providing inputs to growers, we have had extraction at every level. And because we've had this degree of extraction, there is no longer the economic support for vibrant rural communities and for good stewardship. And that is the piece that needs to be regenerated in order for all of the rest of this to flourish.
Absolutely. And then the generational exchange, the generational passing on of that land, and really helping them apprentice into those roles. I think of so many people think of Joel Salatin as, the guy, but it's actually, he's the son of the guy. Like his dad was the pioneer. And the reason he's the way he is because he grew up honoring his father, honoring that pathway, and he compounded it. And I feel like that's what needs to happen. We need to start on this path, and it will compound it with generationally and with time.
Well, think about Joel's impact and think about Joel's achievement. You could ask the question, what is Joel's greatest achievement? Is it the fact that he is a farmer that you could say has star power? His name is probably more widely recognized than almost any other farmer in the country, maybe in the world, for being a farmer. Um, Is it because of the regeneration he's been able to facilitate on his family farm? I would put forward that Joel's greatest impact and the greatest value that he's been able to bring is inspiring and facilitating thousands, if not tens of thousands, of other young farmers to get started farming, both through his internship and the people that he has guided and coached directly, both on his farm and in the region and many regions around the world. But people, also the people who he has inspired in his writing and has who he has shown the way. He has shown a way for people to get back into landscapes, to gain access to land, to build profitable, successful businesses, farm businesses, in an era when that has been very difficult for many people to find the pathway. He's been able to show them a pathway. And that is perhaps Joel's greatest success and his greatest contribution. Because I can't think of any other individual that I know of who has influenced as many thousands of people as Joel has directly.
I 100% agree with that. And I think one of the hallmarks of that is the fact that his son is carrying on the family business, the fact that his family is so involved. So many people that I see go out into the world and try to convince the world of something, but then their own family is like, "Sure, buddy." And he has done the work. He has done the work so that his family's carrying it forward. He doesn't need to be there to run that farm because he's figured out that generational link.
And I visited Joel's farm this summer. I forget the exact number. They had a team of close to 30 people and that are on the farm. Many of the people who are on the farm were previous interns who've been on the farm and then who left perhaps to start their own enterprise, but they loved the community and the environment for whatever reason they came back. So this is now a multi-family enterprise. It is not just Joel's son, but there are multiple families and 30 people who are supported on this farm. And Joel was like, we could make 60 enterprises out of this farm. Like we don't have enough people or he's saying that there's the opportunity, there's room for many more people on that enterprise with additional value adding and growing different types of crops, higher labor crops, and so forth. So he sees this potential. And the thing that I so appreciated about being there was the tremendous appreciation and respect and admiration that the entire team had for Joel, and that fact that this was such an incredible environment, they wanted to come back to participate in that environment.
I feel like that's a hallmark of the kind of change that we need. It's the holistic, from soil all the way into our hearts and all the way into the community's hearts. Because that's what creates a political will. That's what creates a community will for that change. And it does you don't get there from the top down. You don't get there any
Yeah.
other way than that slower, harder work and community work.
I think look at the people we admire. We've just been speaking about Joel Salatin, but look at Will Harris. He has regenerated and revitalized the rural economy of that small town. Like I forget what number I heard, but he is the employer for like 80% of the people in a 20-mile radius. I'm probably wrong on that number. Don't hold me. But he is the significant employer in Bluffton, Georgia. The majority. And he's completely regenerated and revitalized that small town. And that's one operation. What can happen if we have dozens, hundreds, thousands of other operations like that scattered across the country? That is the type of agriculture that we need to build.
And I mean, this is exactly what I've been trying to do with permaculture is rebuild communities. And I've been telling people that it's the farmers, it's the producers, it's the ranchers that create the actual natural resource connections that we need to have a civilization, that we need to even survive. I read this book over and over again. Dirt Erosion of Civilizations. I love this book, my signed copy. And it just always reminds me that we are in this cycle where people have forgotten and and people are making terrible choices because they've forgotten what's possible. And I remind myself of that, but I wish there was a book, maybe you can write it, that reminds us of the possibilities of that
What can we
community
do?
vision that because so many, I mean, we go on TV, we go on the movies, we go even go in novels, and it's all tragedy. It's all the worst case scenario. We're trained to like read and trade and think in these tragedies. But the reality is the greatest story is a story of our lives that we live in triumph, that we live in service, that we live in connection. And John, you're living that story. John, you are spreading that story. And it is an honor to share that with our soil and an honor to be a friend.
Well, thank you, Matt. I think that's an excellent closing note. You're correct in that um, we need a clear, powerful vision of where we want to go. And that is true for us collectively as a culture, as a society, as a civilization, but it is also true for all of us as individuals. The most powerful thing we can do is to build a clear image in our mind. It's called imagination for a reason. Build a clear image in our mind of exactly where we want to go, what we want the future to look like, what we want our future to look like, and then to begin manifesting that. I was about to say to begin working towards it, but the reality is that, um, in my opinion, the majority of the work is not sweat equity. There is a great deal of there is that required. I'm not suggesting that isn't necessary, but all the sweat equity in the world without a clear image will not get you there. So it is important for each one of us to build a clear image in our mind of what the possibilities are. So thank you, Matt. Thanks for all you're doing. Thank you to all of our listeners. Please connect with me online in the dozens of places that I'm at, and would love to have follow-up conversations.
Thank you, John. Always thank you so much.